What is something that 2020s kids will never get to experience? Story 1. Playing outside until your mother yelled at you from the kitchen window to get your ass inside it's late, drinking water from the garden hose, the excitement of new tech, burning CDs, iPods, everything pre-2010 as I guess. Story 2. Rolling down a car window and having the handle fall off, having to manually wind a cassette with your finger when the film, is it called the same when it's just audio? Gets pulled out. Having relatives accidentally record family events over your favorite Disney VHSs, playing kickball on your one-way neighborhood street, windows be damned. Story 3. Massive, powerful V8, diesel sport sedanes and coupes of early 2000 Decisiskins, European Marset, because they are already banned in most countries and will probably go extinct before they get to drive. Man who did not experience the torque of a 5.0510 TDI Passat, or grace and elegance of a 4.2 TDI V8. Audi A8 really has some more life to experience. And for the Americans, yes, we really did put 5.0-liter V10 diesel engine on a FWD Volkswagen from early 2000s. Story 4.1. Buying a strategy guide for a video game and playing the game with the book open, turning page by page as you progressed. Not a phone with an IGN guide or player-created one. 2. Or, if you go back further, actually drawing your own maps on grid paper for games that didn't have guides. I still remember my grandfather, yes, he played NES games, drawing dungeon maps for Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, and Metroid with a pencil, replaying areas multiple times until he got it right, so that on his second playthrough, he'd have a much easier time. 3. Getting magazine subscriptions and eagerly awaiting each new issue. I'd have a shit day at school and check the mailbox after getting off to find my new issue of Nickelodeon Nintendo Power /GamePro /Beckett Dragon Ball Z Collector and being like, yee, and then I'd cheer right up. My parents had subscriptions too. My stepmother was subscribed to Entertainment Weekly, People in US, and my dad was subscribed to Mad. So if I didn't have a new mag to read that particular week, I'd read theirs. We had stacks upon stacks of magazines in my house. 4. Having a big binder full of CDs that you or your parents kept in their car. Those binders sucked and scratched your CDs the more you took them in and out. So by a few years' time, those fuckers wouldn't even play anymore. 5. Everybody at school talking about last night's episode of whatever. Friends, Dragon Ball Z, Nick or Cartoon Network cartoons, etc. Because everyone watched the same channels and everything came on at the same times and days every week. Media in general was a more community thing. Not everyone liked the same stuff, but we had our little groups for those that did. Story 5. Walkmans, Airway, Brandt's 5 and 10, LS Airs, Farrell's Ice Cream Parlor at Scottsdale Mall, SB Indiana, Scottsdale Mall. Kmart subs from Kmart Government Cheese, black and white box, Best Grilled Cheese, Powdered Milk, why does it cost your left arm and 3 toes nowadays, WTH? The Blizzard of 78, walking, anywhere one key to unlock the car door, and another to start it. Story 6. A real phone dial, a TV tuner dial, a radio tuner knob, different keys for the door and the ignition, in 10 years keys. 4. 3B and WTVS, TV test patterns going up after Carson, programming the VCR, 3 in the tree, microwaves with a knob for the timer and no adjustable power settings, mag tape, audio, video, computer, the whole analog world. Story 7. I was just telling my son how one time in grade school, my grandpa forgot to pick me up from Little League practice, so I had to walk to the nearest store, Venture, and ask the lady at the perfume cosmetic booth to use the phone so I could simply call home for them to pick me up. And where to pick me up. Story 8. Kids playing on the playground. I so rarely see them real winter and snowball battles some dirt cheap or free parties sneak into concerts, or easily get in as a youngster longer idle times to gather new ideas. Additionally, fewer impact plus stress from media, and fewer electro-smog and crappy waves, living without the feeling of being recorded, living without social media DC++ FTP download sites, Juarez classic devices, like MP3s, Magno recorders, CD hi-fis. I miss compact phones with small display computer parts, disassembling stores selling cheap parts, arcade stations, and real casinos, banned in my country, glass bottle beverages, and cola. Story 9. Sitting at the playground near the apartment building, and around lunchtime parents' heads pop up one by one from the window and yell to their lid to go home and eat lunch. Yelling for a parent. Their head pop out. They recognize by the voice that their kid is calling as every kid just calls mom. You ask them to thwar something for you, and then you see it being thrown out, and then calculate where it would land, doing stupid stuff without it being publicized, recorded. Story 10. That feeling when they first made TVS pause able, and no longer did we have to take a 900 miles per hour shit during our 4-minute commercial break window. Rewinding your favorite VHS to watch it again, and having to wait an eternity to do so. That ungodly moment where the VCR decides to vomit your favorite VHS's guts, and it's up to your sibling with small fingers or your dad to fix it because you're a wuss afraid of breaking it further. The old Nickelodeon bumpers coming on in the early morning on a weekend while you and your little brother ate Go-Gurt for breakfast because your mom was still asleep. The overall aesthetic and sense of self and security. Sneaking online on your Nintendo DSi and having to hide it under the pillow and fake sleep when your mom comes in to check on y'all. Story 11. In no specific order. Finding your way with paper maps. My mom and I went on a 400 kilometers vacation trip when I was around 10 years old. Finding our way with the help of a bunch of paper maps we had brought. Movie rental stores. In the town I live in now, it went from 4 rental stores within spitting distance to one last bastion, a 20-minute walk from my block, begrudgingly giving up its last DVDs around 10 years ago. I will remember the feeling of walking around, looking at all the movies until the day I die, not to mention picking a movie at random and hoping it wasn't terribly bad. In the same vein as movie rental stores, arcades, pinball machines, asteroids, Golden Axe, R-Type, Twin Eagle, Flying Shark, Spy Hunter, Bond's Adventure, Prehistoric Isle, the list goes on. And when I grew up, there was always some store with at least a couple of arcade machines. I must have spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on arcade games over the years. Looking something up in a physical encyclopedia, or going to the library to see if they had anything that covered the specific thing you were wondering about. I have also ended up reading some books I would never have discovered if it wasn't for me trawling the shelves for something totally unrelated. Being bored. I have done some really stupid shit because I was bored, and my grandparents told me to get creative. It led to me taking my bike, and later my moped, out to explore every nook and cranny around where I lived, and I often let my imagination run absolutely wild and dreamed up these fantastic adventures I would go on. I was Calvin, and my bike was my Hobbes. Social gatherings. When I was little, I lived with my mom, uncle, and grandparent, and at least once a week my uncle would invite a couple of his friends over, and we would gather in the living room and play cards and tell stories for hours. Likewise, my mom used to run the local community house, and there were a bunch of gatherings there. Birthday parties, Christmas party for the local kids, dancing, local bands playing, summer parties and all that. Now that's all gone, and the community house closed years ago because nobody used it, so my mom couldn't afford to pay the bills. And if Reddit is something to go by, I'm somewhat of an anomaly, since I get together with friends to play board games once a week. Instead, we all sit and stare at screens, doom-scrolling while being afraid that we'll be a bother if we call that friend we used to hang out with all the time. Edit. 2000 to 2010-ish internet. It was a plethora of personal sites and small forums where some nerds with common interests would gather to write about their niche passion, and you could find some absolute treasures out there. Now it's ads, and more ads, and then 400 pages of search engine optimized drivel. Reddit, for all its flaws and loss of quality over the years, seemed to be one of the few sites where you can still find that nerd who will write a 4-page essay about how you could theoretically use virtual particles to make a real-life lightsaber. Story 12. The Golden Age of Flash. I used to play a lot of Flash games back in my youth. I spent a lot of time on Armor Games, Addicting Games, AndCon, and a few other sites. I played a lot of the Last Stand series and my Pet Protector too. These things to an extent are accessible, but not to the point it was back in 2000s and 2010s. I don't think nearly as many kids will get to experience that, and none of them will know what it was like to spend hours going through these sites, trying out new games, and replaying faves. Story 13. Never having a handheld phone, never having a beeper, having only 3 channels on the TV, never knowing about AIDS, going to dances at the Y in junior high, driving down country roads drinking Miller beer in high school, smoking weed when it was a dime bag, hearing the Cars for the first time, hearing the Eagles, Kiss, and Foreigner for the first time. Nobody had social media or a computer, not being bullied or having your whole life online. The 70s were amazing. Story 14. Used to be, if you could pull some sick tricks on your skateboard or with a football, or if you could draw really well, or if you were really smart or beautiful, that's something you'd be recognized for. Now anyone can pull out their phone and show you a 10-year-old in Brazil who's doing crazier stuff with his eyes closed. Nowadays, you're forced to compete against 8 billion other people because we've lived through generations of competitive cultures, like it's a whole part of forming an identity for lots of people. But I think that's why taking a step forward requires more confidence nowadays, and suffering a setback feels heavier. Story 15. It's sad that in today's world, kids won't know what it's like to be without the internet. When I was 10, I just wanted to buy the next book in whatever series I was reading, or by whatever author I was enjoying at the time, and sit on my swing in the backyard all summer reading. My 10-year-old niece wants expensive clothes and makeup, and to be internet famous. She can't be without internet access or entertain herself without it. Sadly, I don't think kids today will ever be able to self-separate using the internet as a tool to learn, and will only use the internet as a way to entertain themselves. Story 16. The dozens of AOL discs you would get in the mail. Paying for the internet in minutes. I remember my brother and I only got an hour online each week. Any more than that would cost my parents an exorbitant fee for going over our minutes. If someone picked up the phone while I was using my precious 1 hour and it kicked me off, and then taking 10 minutes to get back online. AOL chat rooms. Playing Leisure Suit Larry when my parents were unaware. LOL Kool-Aid. So much Kool-Aid. The little ice cream cups with the wooden spoon spatula. Pogs and Pogs getting banned. Story 17. I'm Gen Z, graduated high school in 2020, and my parents are younger boomers. Growing up, I didn't experience new tech until much later in my teens. VHS tapes, corded landline phone, shitty dial-up internet. My dad still to this day uses printed-out MapQuest directions when going somewhere new, and I think he still has an AOL email address. My house growing up was stuck 10, 15 years in the past, even up to the mid-2010s. My parents didn't get smartphones until about 2019. They never really cared about upgrading their things or changing their ways of life, and we were way too poor to get new things anyway. Growing up this way, it's really weird for me to see other people exactly my age who don't know what a floppy disk is or have never stepped foot in a family video. My town finally closed ours in 2020, I think. Makes me feel older than I actually am, especially around my nieces and nephews who are growing up in this newest generation. I'm technically not much older than them, but I feel so vastly different. Story 18, pre-internet/social media world. It really was different, because people weren't constantly connected and filming, documenting everything all of the time. There was a lot more mysticism in the world, and therefore more wonder. Don't get me wrong, a lot of things are better today than they were in the past. I'm not going to be one of those back in my day it was all better assholes, because it really wasn't. That said, it does feel like some magic in this world died with that era, and I can't help but feel a little sad about it. It's why I usually put down my phone, turn it off, and don't really take pictures during trips or events. Knowing the only proof that it happened is in my memories makes it more precious than if I had a bunch of photos, posts, and videos I could come back to at any second. Story 19. The way it felt on summer vacation to play outside with your friends without phones. I'm only 30, but summer in the early 2000s will never be topped for me. Just a bunch of kids playing baseball, exploring the woods, not worrying about Insta or Facebook. There were still bullies and social constructs, but at least we all had a mutual understanding of, we all have to play together all summer, so we might as well try to get along. Story 20. An absolute avalanche of media geared towards kids. Seriously, I think about how many cartoons there were for kids in the 90s, not to mention game shows and sitcoms, and I come to the conclusion that my generation was spoiled in this regard. I guess the kids have a lot of TikTok or whatever they're into now, but it doesn't feel like the same thing. Story 21. Looking through physical TV guides that came with the paper. Missing an important episode of a TV show and having to hope you're able to catch a rerun somewhere down the line. Not being able to watch one show in its entirety because the broadcaster only licensed to the first 2 seasons and you don't have cable, so you only get to watch Book 3, Fire, when you're in your teens after finding a box set in the DVD section nearly a decade later after getting back into animation. Story 22. Privacy. In the 90s, Palm Pilots weren't even connected to the internet, unless you had a Palm 7. Now just about everywhere you go, Google Maps is great, isn't it? And anything you do is logged by some app on your phone and handed over to whatever tech company wants to play Big Brother. Even your internet history, email account, cloud storage, social media likes, and DMs are monetized. The extra bonus is that since it's for sale, the police don't need a warrant for it. They can just buy it. Story 23. 8 tracks, beta tapes, VHS, tape recorders, and music tapes. Constant and proper music vids on MTV. Driver's license for under $100. WW2, Korean War, Vietnam War, Reagan, Nixon administration, the Iron Curtain, Cold War, fall of the Berlin Wall, fall of the Iron Curtain, dissolution of the Soviet Union, Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky, press conference. I do not know that woman. Watching 9/11 happen real-time on TV. Story 24. So I will say this for the average person. From a North American perspective, BC, there can be some global differences that I am not caught up with. Probably having a traditional childhood or social life. A lot of things are more virtual now, and there is so much pressure to follow superficial trends created by various capitalistic markets to sell products based on encouraging fear and lack mindsets. They also won't know about all the amazingly useful banned books, or the joys of being a library kid with all the books banned and censorship going on. Family vacations and general family outings that some families could afford pre-pandemic are also replaced with financial limits to travel. For families that couldn't afford that, even minor treats will be a risky financial investment. Even groceries are ridiculously overpriced and shrinkflated, so healthy eating is a struggle and malnourishment can happen more easily. BC food banks are supplying less, though sometimes you can support local farmers or farming co-ops and become self-sustained with vertical gardens and food forests. Also, in many places, occupying public spaces for free is being restricted by the police, along with simply feeding the homeless, which is now a crime in several places. The outlook on home ownership is bleak. So many children and future current adults won't find that a feasible experience in many places, let alone being able to have the means to travel to other parts of the world and try life there. I feel sad for the kids who won't be able to get fresh air in a backyard or decompress in a private outdoor space away from higher noise pollution areas. I was lucky enough to experience being in homes through distant relatives occasionally, and that saved my sanity as a kid. My heart goes out to all the kids facing very adult concerns, or watching their guardians fall apart from the many impacts of financial hardship in one of the worst global periods in the 21st century.